Well, look, you can edit that out, mate. That's fine.
Welcome to another episode of Blockcast with Will and Simon. What about those markets today?
Well, just on the markets, I think basically we're just waiting to see any more contagion. Basically, the whole FTX drama still. And I don't want to talk about FTX because we've talked about it a lot in the last couple of weeks.
Which brings us to the point of really important point of tokens, making sure that we're holding the correct tokens, making sure that we spot the scams, because during when the market is going great, nobody cares, everything is mooning, it doesn't matter. But during downturns like this, it's really important that we know that we're holding the right tokens. So Simon, what are some things that you think are important, not so much in terms of spotting the really good projects? I think that is something we can cover next time. What do you think is important? What are the red flags that you see when you spot scams out there in the market?
Yeah, sure, mate. And it's quite timely because I was at a conference just on the weekend, and there's still a lot of people still quite unsure on how to spot these things, and especially retail. So one of the ones which I think is just one of the biggest red flags that comes up straight away is whenever a project tries to say that it's the next Bitcoin or it's better than Bitcoin. I think any project that's trying to claim that, it's clearly a big red flag, and have a good think about that, because I think as far as the next Bitcoin, no one really knows what that is or cares what that is. It's purely marketing material. So that's always a big red flag, that one. And then when we get to more the actual protocols themselves, there's always, some really high yields for staking or being involved in their protocol some way, especially the DeFis. So you've got to really question, where are those yields coming from? We've gone through, I guess, the DeFi summer where we saw all the, the proper DeFi protocols coming out. And if you're getting into the space where there's huge yields coming out of it, it's probably an inflationary token. So you've got to know that going into it. Another thing I think we've learned from this year especially is just, who's the person behind a lot of these projects? We seem to be putting up people who probably shouldn't be put on a pedestal in this space. The aggressive, the arrogant, the pushy leaders. Think of like your Do Kwons. They, were very critical of anybody who questioned their protocol. So I think we need to start, asking questions about that. Do we really want to be putting our money in a space where it's a bit of a toxic environment? I also think one of the things that we're kind of learning now is that, how are they raising their money? And people starting to, ICOs was obviously a huge thing a few years ago. They're still occurring to a degree now, and you got to question, why are they doing an ICO anymore? Is it just purely fundraising? So what's the value behind it? Really good projects these days. There's plenty of venture capital now, so people aren't doing ICOs if it's a good project a lot of the time these days. So if they're doing an ICO to raise money, then obviously some venture capitalists have probably passed on them. So I'd be careful and worried about someone doing an ICO these days. And it kind of goes with NFTs as well. People are just NFT minting there to raise money in many ways as well. So I think we need to start questioning why they're asking for money from us. What's the real value of it? And I think ICOs or some of the NFT mints really start to question my mind of value in that. And then I guess we could go on to just the socials in general. If you're looking at a project these days, socials are expected. It's the norm. So you need a protocol, or I guess the business, to be quite vocal in the social space. They should be on Twitter. They should have some Discords. They should actually interact and answer your questions. They shouldn't be entirely silent. So anything that doesn't have an active social is always, I think, a big red flag for me. And I guess just one of the interesting things that I kind of find is a lot of new projects come out and they've got an ERC20 token and they're saying, oh, we've got a blockchain coming soon. And so that raises flags for me, because most things don't need their own blockchain, and most things probably shouldn't have their own blockchain. So if someone's saying that, to me, that just reeks of them not really knowing what they're doing. They don't really have a product market fit, because a niche product does not need its own blockchain. There's plenty of blockchains that you should be working on. So I think those are kind of some of the very obvious red flags. And, there's so many good projects out there that if you are seeing some of these red flags, it's probably just time to move on and look at a different one. What about you, Will? What are your thoughts?
That makes a lot of sense. And I really love what you said about socials, low activity on socials. So obviously that first of all shows that if it's got low activity, it means nobody knows about it. But by extension, that means they don't really have a marketing team. By extension, that means they might not really know exactly what they're doing, But then moving on to activity, I think something that's really key to look at is GitHub. GitHub is where every open source project should store their code. And when you go there, it's easy to see how often everything was updated. Now, very active projects, you can see the updates happening sometimes even on an hourly basis, but in the least, you can see it happening on a daily basis. For a Scummy project, you can tell that they either forked something or they created a website from it, and then that was that. There's absolutely no coding going on, and it's just them hiring influencers on YouTube maybe to pump their token. So that's one thing, low GitHub activity. I think another thing is the token utility. So it's like you mentioned, sometimes it's just high yields, and all they're doing is just inflating this token and hoping that somebody out there will buy it, but they really don't have an economic sink. So really, when you're looking for a project and they give you the tokenomics, a lot of the times the tokenomics is just a list of when they will release their tokens for the coders and for anybody else who invested in it. But that has nothing to do with tokenomics. Really, in tokenomics, you should be looking for economic sinks. Does this thing have a fee structure? Where does the tokens go? Are they burned? Now, that's kind of a sink. And they shouldn't just be burned for burn's sake. They really should be burned for a reason, something like fees or something like that. They should have compelling reasons to stake, for example. So that's a big one. And another thing you can do is look at pre-seed investors. So usually that's a really good way of learning whether your project is interesting or not. So if your project has spoken about the people who have invested in it, and these people have clout, money, you can tell they've done their due diligence, and that's usually a really good sign of a good project or a project that might be a little bit dodgy. Layering that, you can check whether they've had audits or whether they plan to do audits. That's a key sign, key giveaway of a good or bad project. The other thing is the technical docs. They should be really detailed on how their project works, why it's supposedly an Ethereum killer. It should be very honest in giving its pros and cons. So you have projects like Solana that are faster than Ethereum. Are they an Ethereum killer? Maybe, but I wouldn't say that Solana is necessarily better. It has sacrificed some things to be a little bit faster than Ethereum. Same to layer 2 projects, layer 1 projects. So technical docs, big thing to look at. And then history of the team. Who's building it? Who are they? Is it just some randos out there, or is it people who are known? What's their LinkedIn like? And then one thing is the experts. Are the experts excited? So it doesn't have to be built by the experts, but if you see, let's say, Vitalik really excited about a project, it's probably very interesting. If nobody cares, if the experts don't really care about the project, it might not be that interesting, because really what sets projects apart is the technical quality of the project, and that feeds into the economic quality of the project. And once you have those two together and a beautiful economic sink, that's a good project to invest in. But this is not financial advice. Do your own research. How about you, Simon? What do you think of those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you turned on another term there, where the next ETH killer kind of thing, or as I was mentioning for the next Bitcoin. I think if a project itself is saying that, then it's market hype. They're just doing that because maybe the community might come out and say yes, Solana is the ETH killer, but if the core project doing that is saying that, then I think they're just trying to hype themselves up. I don't think they're actually legitimate because I don't think these days people care. We don't need to be negative of our competitors. You should just compete on the grounds that you compete in with your project.
And I really think we need ways to standardize how some of these projects are measured, because unfortunately the regular user doesn't have a way to measure this, and the SEC does try to protect the regular users, but at the same time they actually hinder them from participating in things that can actually make them a little bit of money, let's be honest. And so I wish
it's a good idea. I don't think across any industry there's a standardized way to compare things. I think of stocks, comparing all these different companies. So companies are different, blockchains are different, protocols and blockchains are different. So yes, you can try and systemize how you look at it, but at the end of the day, there still needs to be that little bit of art or class or knowledge to be able to critique them. But yeah, you could definitely put some processes in place as an individual can to sure make it easier to identify.
Oh yeah, and like you said, nothing is certain. There's systems that can help at least filter out the bad projects from the good projects. And another really thing to remember is that a project may have done everything right. It may have the right people, it may have the right skills, the right technicalities, everything. But then even that is not a guarantee of success. We all know in the startup world that probably less than 10% of products succeed, and maybe even fewer than that in the long term. Look at the whole 90s boom. 80s and 90s boom. A lot of great projects out there, but not too many are still standing. It's just Google, Facebook, Instagram. So that's something really key to consider as well.
Yeah, and I think the age-old message of if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
That's
Probably need to apply that to most crypto projects. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
That's it. That's it.
Alrighty, well, thank you, Will. Thanks for another episode, mate, and we will catch you again next week.
Until next time, Simon.
Thanks, mate.